Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Today we will discuss the articles displayed on the screen from the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 17th February 2019. So let us start our discussion. Now, this article on page number 13 is related to the concept of secularism. And you should note that in the background of Sabrimala judgment, a debate has started as to whether the state should intervene in the matters of religion or not. And we know that in the famous Sabrimala judgment, the Supreme Court has allowed the entry of women in the temple. However, the public at large has been opposing this entry of women in the Sabrimala temple. So, in this line, the author has analyzed the nature of religion in case of India. And in this line, he has highlighted that why is it necessary for the state to intervene in the matters of religion, especially when the religious practices are discriminatory in nature. So, this will form a part of the General Studies Paper 1 under the topic Secularism. Secondly, it can also be a part of the General Studies Paper 2 under the topic Important Constitutional Features. Now, if you go through the previous year questions of the mains examination, you will find that exactly same question has been asked in the year 2014 and 2018 in the General Studies Paper 1. And the question reads, how do the Indian debates on secularism differ from the debates in the West? The question that was asked in 2014 was very similar, and it read how the Indian concept of secularism is different from the Western model of secularism discussed. So this shows that the previous year questions can be repeated in the same manner at times. So under this we will try to understand the basic concept of secularism in the Indian constitution and also about the difference between the Indian and the Western model of secularism. Now if you go through the social science NCERT of class 8th, which is the social and political life, in the second chapter, the concept of secularism has been explained very lucidly. So let us look at the important highlights of this chapter to understand the concept of secularism and how Indian concept of secularism is different from the Western concept of secularism. So simply, what is meant by the term secularism? So this chapter explains that secularism refers to the separation of religion from the state. Now let us understand why is it important to separate the religion from the state. Now, here you should note that in any country, there are people from different religions living together. However, in any country, one religious group is always in majority. Now, as one of the religion has majority in the country, it can try to discriminate or persecute the religious minorities. That is why, to stop the tyranny of the majority and to stop the violation of fundamental rights of the minorities, the principle of secularism, that is, distancing of the state and religion, is one of the important pillars of democratic societies. Now, the second reason for distancing the state from the matters of religion is the need to protect the freedom of individuals to exit from their religion, embrace another religion, or have freedom to interpret the religious teachings. So, the two important reasons for the separation of state from the religion are that there should be no tyranny of majority and violation of fundamental rights of the minority. And secondly, there is a need to protect freedom of individuals to exit from the religion, to embrace another religion, or have the freedom to interpret the religious teachings differently. Now let us understand key features of the Indian concept of secularism. First is that one religious community should not dominate another community. Secondly, some members of the community should not dominate other members of the same religious community. And thirdly, the state should not enforce any particular religion, nor it should take away the religious freedom of individuals. So these are the three principles on the basis of which Indian secularism has been defined. So in order to practice these important aspects of Indian secularism, the Indian state works in three ways. The first strategy of Indian state is to distance itself from the religion, which means that the Indian state is not ruled by any religious group. And secondly, it does not support any one particular religion. So in this case, we note that the government spaces like the courts, the police stations, or the government schools and offices are not supposed to display or promote any one particular religion. The second strategy of the Indian state for practicing the ideals of Indian secularism is the strategy of non-interference in matters of religion. So this means that the Indian state does not interfere with the religious practices of particular religions. And the third strategy is the strategy of intervention. Now, this intervention is at times required because, for example, in case of Hinduism, the practice of untouchability has been practiced for a long time. So, in order to remove the discrimination, the state has also adopted a strategy of intervention, For example, in case of untouchability, the Constitution explicitly abolishes untouchability under its articles or the fundamental rights. So, the three strategies adopted by the Indian state in practicing the Indian secularism are that India is not ruled by any particular religious community. Secondly, there is a strategy of non interference in personal matters of religion. And thirdly, on a community level, Indian state intervenes to remove the discriminatory practices like untouchability. Now, this chapter of NCRT further provides the way in which Indian secularism is different from the secularism practiced in other democratic countries. And in this line, it has highlighted the example of the Constitution of United States and the way in which secularism is practiced in United States. So it explains that secularism in US means that the state cannot declare any religion as the official religion of that country. Secondly, the state cannot give preference to any one religion. So, in the United States of America's case, the separation between the state and religion means that neither the state nor the religion can interfere in the affairs of one another, which means that there is complete separation between the state and the religion. However, the way in which Indian secularism is practiced is different from the one that is practiced in the United States of America or other democratic countries, where complete separation of state and religion has been provided. In India's case, as we have noticed that the Indian state can interfere in the matters of religion if there is any discriminatory practice that is present. For example, the Indian Constitution has provided the abolition of untouchability, which was a practice under Hinduism. And as has been highlighted in this chapter, in Indian secularism, the state can intervene in religious affairs. And in this line, we have noticed that the Indian Constitution intervened in the Hindu religious practice in order to abolish untouchability. So, this further explains that in Indian secularism, though the state is not strictly separate from the religion, it maintains a principled distance vis-a-vis religion. So, in conclusion, it has been provided that any interference in religion by the state has to be based on the ideals which have been laid out in the Constitution. So, you should go through this chapter to understand the concept of secularism in detail. Further, in the book Indian Polity by M. Lakshmikant, the concept of secularism has been explained in the chapter Salient Features of Indian Constitution. And in this chapter, it has provided a list of articles which are related to the concept of secularism in India. So this aspect becomes particularly important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So let us see which all articles are important or highlight the concept of secularism in the Indian Constitution. Now, firstly, you should note that the term secular was not there in the original constitutional text. However, it was added by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976. So this is an important point that should be noted. Secondly, you should note that the Indian preamble also provides for secularism besides the word secular. In this line, the preamble secures to all citizens of India the liberty of belief, faith, and worship. Thirdly, the Article 14, which is related to the right to equality, states that the state shall not deny to any person equality before the law or equal protection of laws. So, which means that the right to equality in the fundamental rights is also related to the concept of secularism, as has been highlighted in the Articles 14, 15, and 16. And we know that in the Article 17, the practice of untouchability has been abolished, which is also a feature of secularism in the Indian context. Further, the Articles 25 to 30 provide the concept of secularism as has been practiced in India. And in this, the Articles 25 to 28 deal with the freedom of religion. And the Article 29 and 30 deal with cultural and educational rights. Further, you should note that in the directive principles of state policy, the Article 44 provides for uniform civil code, and which is also a feature of secularism. So all these articles are important to identify the secularism in Indian Constitution, and these are important for us from preliminary examination point of view. Further, this chapter again explains the difference between the Western concept of secularism and the Indian concept of secularism. And we have learned about it in the chapter of NCRT of class 8th. So to answer the questions which were asked in the previous year in the mains examination, which were related to the difference between the Indian and the Western concept of secularism, you can use this answer structure. So in this case, you can define secularism as it has been defined in the NCRT. Further, we have learned about the Indian concept of secularism and the strategies adopted by the Indian state in the practice of secularism. Thirdly, we have noticed the difference between the Indian and the Western concept of secularism. That should also be mentioned. And also some provisions related to Indian constitution which deal with secularism should also be mentioned in the answer. Now, after going through this discussion, you should try and answer this question from your preliminary examination point of view. And the answer for this question will be displayed after 5 seconds. So the correct answer here is C, that is 2 and 3 are correct because Article 14 is related to the right to equality and Article 44 is related to the Uniform Civil Code, which is again a feature of secularism. And Article 356 is related to President rule and is not directly related to the concept of secularism. And with this, let us move on to the next article. Now, this news article on page number 7 is related to the visit of Norwegian Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs. And in an interview, the minister has highlighted that India and Norway must cooperate to strengthen the WTO. And in this, she has highlighted that the United States is seeking to sabotage the multilateral dispute mechanism. Now, this will form a part of the General Studies Paper 2 of the mains examination under the topic International Relations. Now, in the mains examination of 2018 in the paper 2, there was a question related to the key areas of reform in the WTO that are required in the present context of trade war. Now, in this interview, the Norwegian minister has accused the US of sabotaging the dispute settlement mechanism of WTO. And you should note that the key reform area in WTO in the present time is the dispute settlement body and the appellate system of the dispute settlement mechanism. Now, we have discussed the key areas of reform in WTO in the mains question discussion in the month of October. So, here let us revise the various issues of reform at the WTO in the present context of trade war. In continuation of our series on discussion of the questions that were asked in the mains examination of 2018, today we will discuss a question that was asked in the General Studies paper 2. So today we will discuss the question which was related to the reforms that are required in the WTO in the context of the trade war and especially keeping in mind the interest of India. So this will fall under the General Studies paper 2 of the mains examination under the subtopic Important International Institutions, their structure and mandate. So let us try to understand the approach for writing such questions. Now, as you may be already aware that United States has been involved in tariff wars with China, India and other countries. Now, the WTO has emerged as the main resolution body in the ongoing trade war. Now, in the Daily News Simplified of 20th July 2018, we have discussed about the trade war that is going on between India and United States. Further, you should understand that WTO is involved in the resolution of such trade wars with the use of its dispute settlement mechanism, which has also been explained in the same DNS of 20th July 2018. Now, the context of this answer could have been the trade war between India and US, and another part of this answer could have been the dispute settlement mechanism of WTO. However, now the question arises about the reform of WTO. Now, the issue of WTO reform was covered in the September edition of the Focus under the topic 10th BRICS Summit. Now, at this summit, BRICS countries including India asserted that the dispute in the selection process of new appellate body members needs to be quickly resolved with regard to WTO. Now, this issue for the selection process of new appellate body was to be resolved quickly because it paralyzed the dispute settlement mechanism of WTO. Now, when we talk about the WTO reform in the present context, it is basically about the WTO's appellate body. Now, the issue of reform of WTO's appellate body has also been covered in the September edition of Focus. And regarding this, the Focus reads that the dispute settlement mechanism of WTO has been in news in the context of being a resolution medium in the ongoing trade wars between US and other countries, including India. And if you notice, the statement is similar to the context of the question of the mains examination. Now, this section of the Focus also discussed about the dispute settlement mechanism of WTO. However, let us try to understand what are the issues related to the appellate body of WTO. Now, regarding the appellate body's composition, you should know that it is composed of 7 members who are appointed for a term of 4 years. And they are appointed by the dispute settlement body, which comprises of all the 164 WTO members. Now, you should understand that the dispute settlement body's decisions are taken by consensus and not by majority vote. Therefore, the formal objection by any member country or member state can block the appointment or reappointment of the appellate body members. Now, this consensus method for the appointment of members to the appellate body has raised concerns in the current times. Now, the current concern is that United States has been continuously blocking the appointment of new appellate body members. And you know that the members to the appellate body are selected by a consensus method. That is why the objection of United States is not leading to appointment in the new appellate body. So in this context, the strength of appellate body has reduced from 7 to 4 and it would further reduce to 1 by December 2019 if no new member is appointed. Now the question in the exam asked about the WTO's survival in the present context. So the current concern with regard to survival is that any reduction of members below 3 would render the WTO's dispute settlement mechanism useless. This is because the appellate body requires 3 members to decide on a dispute. And apart from this, the absence of full strength has increased the workload on the present members and has reduced the efficiency of the appellate body. Now, a question related to the appellate body of the WTO was also asked in the test series of Rao's IAS. And the test series of Rao's IAS provides the recommended structure for the answer. It also provides facts and concepts to cite in answer. For example, if you see the recommended structure, it tries to incorporate the current reason for WTO appellate body and the DSM to be in news. So this gives us the context of the question that was asked in the UPSC exam. Now hopefully you have understood the approach for attempting such questions. This article on page number 1 is related to the Chabahar port of Iran. And we all know that this port is being developed by India. And this is being developed in order to have an easy access to the Central Asian nations and Afghanistan. So this will form an important part of the General Studies paper 2 under the topic International Relations. And also this forms an important part for us from preliminary examination point of view under the topic Locations or Geographical Locations. And if you notice in the year 2017, there was a question in the preliminary examination related to the importance of developing Chabahar port by India. And you should notice that the correct answer was that India will not depend on Pakistan for access to Afghanistan and Central Asia. Now, if you notice the location of Chabahar port, it provides India the access to Afghanistan and to the Central Asian countries. And it will not have to depend on Pakistan for accessing these areas. So that is why the development of Chabahar port is important for India. Now, one important ongoing international issue is the imposition of sanctions on Iran by the United States of America because of its nuclear program. And due to the imposition of US sanctions on Iran, the trade of Iran through the Iran's main port, that is the Bandar Abbas port, is being impacted. So the location of Bandar Abbas port is also important for us from the preliminary examination point of view because it is one of the important ports of Iran in terms of trade for Iranian nation. Now, although US has imposed sanctions on Iran, it has provided a waiver for Chabahar port which is being developed by India. Now, as this Chabahar port has received a waiver from the United States' sanctions, Iranian government is keen on leveraging this exceptional waiver for its trade with other countries. And this waiver to the Chabahar port will help Iran bypass the American sanctions. Now, however, India has expressed its concerns that Iran should not overemphasize on Chabahar port because of its waiver. And India is expressing its concern because the Iran government has received this waiver on Chabahar port because of Indian support, so that India can trade and develop with the Afghanistan and the Central Asian countries. However, overemphasis on Chabahar port by the Iranian government can attract sanctions from the US, and US can withdraw the waiver which it has provided to the Chabahar port. So these are some of the concerns that have been raised by India. However, this is a news in transition, and let us wait for the summit to happen. Now, the various aspects of the Chabahar port from India-Iran relations and its importance for India have been discussed in the DNS of 8 September 2018. So in the description of today's video, you will find a link to that video. So you can go through that video to understand the importance of Chabahar port in detail. And with this, let us move on to the next article. This article on page number 14 is related to mariculture, which is a sub-part of aquaculture. Now, this will form a part of the General Studies paper 3 under the topic Economic Development. Now, in this article, it has been highlighted that the mariculture is important for India as a complement to the agriculture. And if you go through the previous year questions, you will find that in the year 2018, there was a question related to the Blue Revolution and the problems and strategies for pisciculture development in India. Further, if you go through the previous year questions in the year 2015, a question was asked related to livestock rearing as a big potential for providing non-farm employment and income in the rural areas. So it is in this line that any practice which supplements the Indian agriculture or supplements the income of the farm sector becomes important for us from exam point of view. So let us understand what is meant by the term mariculture and how it is important for India. So mariculture is a specialized branch of aquaculture. And here you should note that aquaculture deals with the cultivation of fishes, plants, or organisms in controlled environment. And these fishes and plants can be both freshwater fishes and plants or marine water fishes and plants. So the important aspect is that this is conducted under controlled environment. And aquaculture is different from wild fishing, in which it involves capturing fish from the sea or freshwater. And in this case, there is particular cultivation of various species of fish or marine plants and animals. And in this line, mariculture is a specialized branch of aquaculture which deals with marine organisms or cultivation of marine organisms using seawater. So it involves the cultivation of marine organisms for food and other products in the open ocean, an enclosed section of the ocean, in tanks, ponds, etc. And all these areas should be filled with seawater. So this is a primary requirement in mariculture. Now, what kind of organisms are cultivated in mariculture? So these include seaweeds, oysters, shrimps, prawns, and species of fishes. Now, why is mariculture important? So, the article highlights the various issues with the agriculture in the present times. And it highlights that about 37% of the area of entire world is agricultural land. And about one third of this land is being used for cultivation of various crops under agriculture. It further highlights that the world population will increase and rise to about 9.7 billion in about 30 years. And in this line, the land available for crops will further reduce. So, to keep up with the population pressure and to feed these mouths, the agriculture yield will have to increase by 50% till about 2050. It is with this background that mariculture offers possibilities for sustainable protein rich food production. And it also offers possibilities for economic development of local communities. So, the crux is that the population is increasing and it is posing further pressure on the agricultural productivity and the land under agriculture. So that is why mariculture becomes important and offers great possibilities for feeding the ever growing population of the world. Now, regarding the importance of mariculture, you should note that it can be an important supplement in our foods. And here you should note that the seaweeds, which are either micro or macro algae, contribute to about 50% of the photosynthesis that happens in the world. And many of these seaweeds are edible, that is, they can be consumed by human beings. Further, these edible seaweeds are low calorie and are nutrient rich, and they are already being eaten by people in most parts of Southeast Asian countries. It is in this background that India has 844 seaweed species, and with its 7,500-kilometer coastline, it provides immense potential or great possibilities for the cultivation of seaweed in India through the maricultural practices. Now, there are certain advantages of mariculture, and also there are various benefits of adding the seaweeds which are produced through the mariculture in the foods. So, first advantage is that mariculture does not require any use of pesticide or fertilizers. And this makes the various products that are produced by the use of mariculture healthy and environment friendly as well. Secondly, the seaweeds which are produced under mariculture are rich sources of vitamin A and C, and also they are rich in minerals, for example, calcium, magnesium, zinc, etc. Further, the seaweeds have vegetable proteins and omega 3 and 6 fatty acids. So, the major advantage of seaweeds as food is that they do not require pesticides and fertilizers, which means that they are environment friendly in their cultivation. And secondly, they are nutrient rich resources which can be used as a supplement for human food. And in India, where majority of the people are suffering from nutritional deficiencies, we should note that the seaweeds which are produced through mariculture become important for us. However, there are certain challenges if the mariculture is practiced on an industrial scale. So, in this line, it may pose threats to marine and coastal biological diversity. Further, it can lead to wide scale destruction and degradation of natural habitats. And it can lead to the release of nutrients and antibiotics in the mariculture wastes. Further, you should note that the genetic engineering is being used in cultivation of mariculture or improving the productivity of mariculture products. And due to this, accidental release of alien or living modified organisms can result. And finally, if the mariculture is undertaken at an industrial scale, it can lead to displacement of local communities or indigenous communities rather than helping these communities. So, all the points that we have discussed here can be used in answering questions related to mariculture. And also, mariculture as a point can be used in answering questions related to alternatives to agriculture. And also, mariculture can be used in answering questions related to improving the nutritional conditions of the people of India. With this, let us move on to the next article. This article on page number 8 talks about multispectral imaging, which is helping in preservation of various manuscripts that are found in India. So, this technology will form a part of the preliminary examination syllabus under the topic General Science. So, in this article, we will try to understand some key facts related to multispectral imaging. Now, regarding manuscripts, you should note that these are handwritten records. And these records were generally written on cloth pieces, papers, or leaves of plants. And these manuscripts, which are written on papers or leaves or the cloth pieces, are vulnerable to attack from the moisture or bacteria. And over a period of time, they get deteriorated or degenerated. That is why their preservation becomes all the more important. And in this line, the multispectral imaging has come as a boon to save these manuscripts. Now let us understand how does this multispectral imaging helps us in preserving the manuscripts. Now what multispectral imaging does is that it captures the image data within specific wavelengths across the electromagnetic spectrum. So here we should note that out of full electromagnetic spectrum, only those lights which fall under the visible section of the electromagnetic spectrum are visible to the naked eye. And in this line, our eyes have limitation in processing the data which is provided by an image. Now, what multispectral imaging does is that it captures information beyond the visible spectrum as well. So, in this line, the multispectral imaging can capture information related to the infrared and the ultraviolet segment of the electromagnetic spectrum as well. And that is why the multispectral imaging is very important for preservation of artworks or ancient manuscripts. Now, the images which are developed using this technique captures additional information which the human eye fails to capture. Now, for example, if a picture is taken by a normal camera of a fruit or a rotten apple, it looks in this manner. Now, if the multispectral image of that same fruit is taken, it provides information regarding which areas are rotten in this apple. And due to this, the multispectral imaging has an application in food sorting process, in which the rotten food or the rotten fruits can be replaced and identified easily. Now, as we have seen in the last picture, that multispectral image provides additional information which is not possible for a naked eye or a normal camera. And that is why this multispectral imaging captures texts in the manuscripts that are affected by either pests, fungus, or are overwritten or scribbled. And it can also read those informations which have been blackened or scrapped. And all this information is not visible by bare eyes or by normal cameras. And specifically, it uses the infrared rays and the ultraviolet rays, which are not visible by the human eye, for preserving or retrieving the text from the manuscripts. Now, the uses or the application of multispectral imaging is important for us from exam point of view. Now, regarding the uses of multispectral imaging, you should note that it has military applications. And this is because it helps the military in identifying the landmines which have been placed or planted by the militant or terrorist organizations. It further helps in identifying ballistic missiles. It further has application in space-based imaging. And finally, it has application in recording the documents and the artworks. And as we have seen, it is important in capturing information from the manuscripts which have been affected by pests or funguses. Now, after going through this discussion, you should try this question from your preliminary examination point of view. The answer for this question will be displayed after 5 seconds. So the correct answer is D. That is, the multispectral imaging technique has applications in all the three which have been provided in the question. That is, it has applications in landmine detection, space-based imaging, and preservation of manuscripts. And with this, let us move on to the next article. Now, this article on page number 12 is related to the Maharashtra's Thane Creek Wildlife Sanctuary, which is famous for the migratory birds, flamingos. And the land from the Thane Creek Sanctuary is being diverted for the construction of the bullet train project. And we have discussed this issue in detail in the Daily News Simplified of 6th February 2019. And this has been covered by Navid sir. So you should go through this DNS to understand the issue of bullet train passing through the various wildlife sanctuaries and various important aspects related to Thane Creek and other important wildlife sanctuaries which are being impacted by bullet train project. Now, after going through today's discussion, you should try and answer these two questions from your preliminary examination point of view. And the answer for these questions will be displayed after 5 seconds. Now, the first question reads, with reference to mariculture, consider the following statements. The first statement reads, it is related to the cultivation of plants and fishes in fresh water, which is an incorrect statement because it is related to the cultivation of plants and fishes in seawater. The second statement reads that seaweeds are rich sources of omega 3 and 6 fatty acids. This statement is correct, and the correct answer that comes out is B, that is 2 only. The second question reads that Chabahar port is located in which of the following? Now, the first location is the Persian Gulf. Now, this is incorrect because Chabahar port is not located in the Persian Gulf, but the Bandar Abbas port is located in the Persian Gulf. The second reads Red Sea. Chabahar port has no relation to the Red Sea. The third is Arabian Sea, which is the correct option because Chabahar port is located and it opens up in the Arabian Sea. And it is also not located in the Gulf of Aden. Here you should note that the famous city of Hodeido in Yemen is located in the Gulf of Aden. With this, we have come to the end of today's discussion. Now let us move on to the question for the day.